Hi, I'm Lee Herbert from CapturingPassion.com, and this is my look at the Atomos Shogun. The Atomos Shogun is a full 1080 monitor for your camera as well as a 4K recorder, which is a pretty exciting combination. Pretty exciting toaster fridge, if you want to call it that, but it's not a toaster fridge because it's just not. So, why are people so excited about it? The reason why a lot of people are really excited about the Atomos Shogun is it was one of the first products on the market that would allow you to record 4K out of the HDMI port from your Sony a7S. Now, everyone's really excited about the Sony a7S because it's a pretty exciting camera. It shoots practically in the dark. It has a really high ISO, and not only just a high ISO, but you can actually use that high ISO. You can get up to about 80,000 and it's still fairly usable, which is pretty amazing. A lot of people who are really excited about it are event videographers and photographers. The reason behind that is I contract for a company called C2 and we shoot a lot of weddings. Being able to use this camera without having to use any built-in lights or anything like that allows us to travel really light when we're doing run and gun types of setups. Of course, once you add something like the Atomos Shogun, it adds a bit more bulk to the run and gun setup, but it's still a pretty light way to go about things. So the first thing you're probably going to ask yourself is, well, why should I be listening to the views and opinions of this Lee Herbert from CapturingPassion.com if he can't even mount the Shogun the right way around? Because you'll see in my display here, I've got it mounted upside down. The reason why I have it mounted upside down, the way that I've got it set up on my Edelchrome rig here is I like to have the HDMI cable on the right hand side. So really easy to mount the Shogun as you would expect, and then flip the screen if you're having it upside down. So let me just show you quickly in the settings how to do that. Just go into menu, tap display options, tap on flipped display, and it flips the display, and then just tap it again to flip back depending on which way you're going. I'm going to take you through the interface really quickly, and then we're going to get onto some of the things that are really exciting about the device. So up along the top, you've got your input, your quality, you've got your file names, your media type, how much space you've got left on the media, and your battery. To make that go away, just tap on the screen once and it goes away. Tap on the screen again, it comes back. So to begin with, you can see that I am recording my sources HDMI. It's coming in at full 4K off of the Sony a7S, and I could output via SDI the 4K signal as well, which is pretty cool if you're going to output via SDI. Next one along is your quality. So if I just tap on ProRes, you can see here that you can record in ProRes HQ. You can also pick 422 and LTE, and you can see it'll show you how much time you'll record on the space you've got left on whatever drive you've got in the Shogun. Now, in terms of whether you record in LTE, HQ or 422, I think it really comes down to what it is that you're recording. If you're just out and about running and gunning, I think LT or 422 are going to be absolutely fine for what you're doing. It's going to look fantastic regardless. Where you're going to record in HQ is when color correction is going to be a big part of your post process. So for example, if you're doing green screening, you're shooting something in a really high contrast area, then you might go HQ because you're getting a little bit more information. But really for the file sizes that it creates, 422 LT is going to be absolutely fine for what most people are out there doing. Next one along is file naming. I'm not going to go through this a lot. Fairly self-explanatory. If you can read, you can work out how to change the files. Next one along shows you your media. So at the moment you can see I've got a 480 SSD SanDisk card plugged in. Pretty simple. And then you've got your battery. So you can see I've got a relatively fully charged battery, and I don't have this plugged into the AC at the moment. There's been a lot of hoopla on the internet from people who've gotten the first batch of Shoguns, and the battery will last you about 30 to 40 minutes of 4K recording. And that's not good enough. The really nice thing about a company like Atomos is they've come out and they've said, you know what, that isn't good enough. And from now on, they're actually going to ship the Shogun with a higher capacity battery. Of course, that doesn't help the people who've already bought one. But Atomos has got you covered. So if you've been one of the first people to get the Shogun and it came with the smaller capacity battery, get in touch with Atomos through their website and they will exchange that for you for a high capacity battery. I think that's a really great thing that they're doing. And I think it's a good sign that they're a company who really stands behind what they're doing and what they're producing. So good on you, Atomos. I now want to get into the scopes and the tools that you get with the Shogun, and this is what really gets me excited, and for me is where the big value of the Shogun, the Atomos Shogun, is, because when I'm on set, you want to get things right the first time. You don't want to have to reshoot things. You don't want to have to, heaven forbid, go back and reshoot things, set up your lights, set up everything, and have to reshoot stuff. And these scopes and tools really help you make sure that you absolutely nail stuff spot on. Now you might say, well, Lee, I don't need tools and stuff to nail stuff spot on. I've got good eyes. I can see on the back of my screen whether I'm overexposed, underexposed, in focus, not in focus. Pretty straightforward. And absolutely. But you know what? Sometimes the screen on the back of your camera isn't the best screen to look at. It's a bit wobbly. Sometimes you're in really bright sunlight, so you can't see what's going on the screen. Now, fair enough, you're going to have the same issue with bright sunlight with the Shogun, but there is a hood that you can get for it, so that solves that problem. The thing is, your naked eyes lie sometimes. It's true. Whereas when you're looking at scopes, when you're looking at actual numbers and graphs, those don't lie. So you absolutely know when you're checking the graphs and the scopes, I've nailed my exposure, I've nailed my white balance, I've nailed my focus. That's where having these tools is really advantageous. Let's jump in and have a look at those tools. To begin with, you can see in the bottom left hand corner here, I've got my waveform. So right away I can see this shot's fairly well exposed. So I'm just going to tap on it. You can have it right along the bottom. Tap on it again, it'll put it right across the middle of the screen. I don't really use this that much because you sort of can't see what you're looking at. And tap again in the bottom left hand corner, comes back in the bottom left hand corner. But let's look at some of the other tools. So if I tap on my exposure tools down here at the bottom, you can see I've got my waveforms. My next one along is my RGB parade. So I've got my red, blue and green. And I can see that this is pretty well color balanced in terms of white balance, pretty neutral. But let me go ahead and change the white balance on this image so you can see what happens when you sort of stuff it up. And here's one I prepared earlier where it's pretty obvious that it's really, really green, but again, it lets you see it in the RGB parade. And again, with this one, I can see that my reds and my greens are a little bit too high, and it's going to be a very warm image as opposed to a slightly cooler image. Whereas when I go to my third one, that sort of nails the white balance. And actually, this is on auto white balance for the A7S, and as you can see, the auto white balance has pretty much got it down pat. The next tool though is where you're really going to nail your white balance. So the next one is your vector scopes, and I'm just going to bring that up to the center of the screen. And what your vector scopes represent, I'm just going to move that out of the way. You've got your magenta, your blues, your cyans, your greens, your yellows, your reds, and everything in between. And if these white lines are hovering towards any of those, it's a little bit too much of that color. Again, I'll go into my white balance and show you what I mean. Here's one I prepared earlier where again it's a little bit warm. You might like warm, but at least this way you know that it's warm, and it's quite obviously quite warm. Let's go to my overly green one, and as you can see, it's overly green. Now, obviously you can see this with the naked eye, but it's not the extreme changes that you miss. It's the little niggly things that every now and again you miss that. You get back into the edit suite and you're like, oh, damn it, why didn't I see that when I was on set? And, you know, there's ways around it, but I'm a big believer of get it right in camera, save yourself a hell of a lot of time and effort. So yeah, the scopes are really good. Generally when I'm shooting interviews, I shoot with at least 2 cameras, if not 3. There's loads of reasons for that, but mainly because when I get it back into the edit suite, it gives me options. If I want to cut one sentence into another, make what I call a Franken sentence, I can do that and switch between the angles, and nobody's the wiser most of the time. So you want 2 or 3 cameras. Now I shoot, because I like to make my life difficult, with a GH4, an A7S, and a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. All 3 of those cameras have got slightly different sensors. All of those cameras have got different ways that they interpret color. So getting the white balance to match on all of them is an easier way for me to color grade them and try and make it look as close as possible that my entire interview has been filmed on one camera. Now the reason why I have 3 different cameras is because as a trainer, I've decided that I need to know as much as possible about all these different cameras. But if I was purely a production guy, I would generally look at getting the same cameras, because it's going to make my life a lot easier when I'm trying to match them up in terms of colors back in the post. So that's where having this vector scope would be absolutely fantastic. And even if I just end up buying one Atomos Shogun, which I think is going to happen, I'll actually plug it into all three cameras before I start the shoot and make sure that the white balance is roughly the same. So that way it's going to make my life easier when I want to do some grading on them later on and keep the images from all three different cameras matching as best as I can do. Having said that, of course, I'm not a professional colorist and I do okay, but I'm not perfect. Then again, none of us are. Getting back to the waveform, I actually really love this when I'm in a run and gun situation. I was using the Atomos on a corporate job I was doing a couple of weeks ago, and just having this set up on my camera so that when I went from one room to another room, the lighting was quite different, and I could see right away on my screen, on the Shogun, whether I needed to adjust my camera to an extreme to adjust for the exposure, if I just had to make some minor changes to try and keep the exposure roughly the same between those two rooms. So having that histogram on the screen, really cool thing to have. This looks at first of all, our focus peaking. So peaking, in case you don't know, are these red outlines, and it helps me see what's in focus. So I can just, as I adjust my focus, you can see that the red lines show up around my character's glasses, and that's obviously showing that his glasses are in focus. Really cool feature of the Shogun is you can do a 1-for-1 punch in, and I can move it around, and let's say I wanted to focus on the red little camera emblem on there, and I can make sure, bang, yep, that is bang on target. But wait, there's more. You can also do a 2-for-1, and that really punches in. And now this time I want to focus on my X-right, so I'm just going to adjust my focus and get it spot on. Now there is a challenge here because I'm not sure if it's in focus because the red outline is actually kind of covering it. So I can just tap on focus peaking and turn it off to make sure that, yep, no, that's in focus, I'm all good. Another really cool feature is you can change the color that your peaking shows up in, you know, yellow, green, cyan, all these things. Now the reason why you'd want to do this is you'll notice in the background that my character's shirt, I'm just going to punch in 1-for-1, my character's shirt is blue, and I've got my focus peaking set for blue, so I wouldn't be able to tell if his shirt is in focus because, well, it's the same color as my peaking. So I can very easily just scroll my finger along and change the color of the peaking until it's a color that isn't dominant within my framing or my composition. So pretty easy there. Next setting along is your zebras, and your zebras will show you, at the moment I've got them at 85%, what might be overexposed. If I set them to 100, anything that's got a zebra is overexposed. I like to keep mine at 85% because it gives me a bit of wiggle room when I'm back in post and trying to sort stuff out. Let me show you what happens when you really pump things up. So just going to change the shutter speed, and there you can see my shot is well and truly overexposed. And you can see also on the waveform that it's pretty badly overexposed, and then you can pull it back down, have it exposed better. So that's the exposure. The next one is not something that I use a lot before I've been testing the Shogun, but now that I've started using it, I really love having this next feature, which is false color. Now false color is again for exposure, and the way that it works, you see this little key over on the left hand side. So red is blown out, white, you ain't going to recover anything from there, there's no detail, gone, overexposed. And everything down to purple in between. So right away I can see that, you know what, my character's pretty well exposed because I want to expose for his face. His face is in a light grey, and as long as it's in a light grey, dark grey, you're pretty well exposed. Again, I will change the exposure to overexpose my character until I've got some pretty overexposed there, and I'll turn false color off, and you can see that's just, you know, crazy. So you don't necessarily need the false color, but like I said, having these tools lets you make sure. It lets you be confident that what you're seeing on the screen is what you're actually seeing on the screen, because numbers don't lie. So what's on the graph, you know you've got it spot on. Now I want to look at the audio settings that you've got on the Atomos Shogun. So your audio is down here in the bottom left hand corner. Tap on it, brings up your audio settings. At the moment you can see that the Shogun is getting the audio direct via the HDMI cable from the camera. The Panasonic GH4, the Sony A7S and the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera will all push out audio as well as video through HDMI, so you just need the one cable. Pretty handy. But there are some cameras who don't push it out. So for example, I know I used to shoot with a Canon 5D Mark III that doesn't push audio out via the HDMI. So you're going to need to get a separate audio cable to push the audio out from the 5D into the microphone input on the Shogun to get audio. Now, the audio comes in through this wonderful octopus of cables, which is less than ideal, but you know, it is what it is. And I've actually watched a review that Jeremy, the CEO of Shogun, was talking about it, and he said the reason why they put it on the side as opposed to in the back and with all these cables is there just wasn't the room to put it anywhere else. So, you know, laws of physics, I'm willing to give them a pass. Now, you'll see here that I have two shotgun mics that I have plugged into the Shogun, but yet there's nothing coming out from the display here. So it looks like they're not working or nothing's happening. But that's because both of these microphones require phantom power, and I need to turn that on for the Shogun to work. So to turn that on, you come over to where it says mic 48V, tap on it, it says warning, you're about to turn on phantom power. You go, yep, that's fine. And now that I've turned on phantom power, you can now see that I am getting the audio from both microphones. You can see here this blue bar at the top, that's showing which audio you're monitoring. So if you've got headphones plugged in, you're going to be hearing the audio at the moment that's coming in via the camera. But if I want to change to my XLR inputs, I just tap the headphone button on the inputs over there, and now I'll be hearing what's coming in directly from these shotgun mics. Some of the other features that you've got here on audio is you've got your input gain, so you can adjust the gain, the volume of what's coming in the audio. And the other one that's really worth looking at is your audio delay. With some cameras over the cable, you are going to have a little bit of a delay, and you'll be talking, right? You won't hear what's going, you know, it'll look like one of those bad Police Academy movies where the guy does the, you know what I mean. Or maybe you're really young and you don't know what I mean, or maybe I'm really old and I don't know what I mean. Yay! Cool. So you can do an audio delay. Generally with the Canon cameras with the 5D Mark III, you'll look at a 5 or 6 second delay, and that'll normally sort out your delay issues. While we're in audio, the last thing I want to show you about it is a little gotcha that I found. So at the moment, if I tap on, you know, the 48V, it will turn on phantom power. But the other night I was trying this out, and I just was tapping, it wouldn't work. And that's because I had to change my audio in. So at the moment, if I've got an audio in, you notice that the arrow next to the 48V is grayed out, so you can't get it to do anything. I changed the audio input again to line level, it's grayed out, I can't do anything. But when I change it to mic level minus 40 dB, then it's highlighted and I'm able to turn 48 volt input in. So just worth knowing and looking at that function inside of the audio settings. So at the moment, you'll see that I'm recording at 4K, but watch this. If I don't have the 4K turned on my camera, so you do have to check sometimes. You might actually plug your camera in and it'll be recording at 1080, it won't be recording at 4K, but your camera's capable of pushing 4K out through the HDMI. And you're like, well, what the hell? Why isn't this working? The reason why it's not working is you've got to go onto your camera and actually turn 4K output on. On the A7S, you go to the 6th menu from the left to the right, so the one furthest on the right, go down to menu 3 in that menu, and right down at the bottom it says HDMI 4K output. It'll probably be turned off. Turn it to your frame rate, and hey presto, now you're recording at 4K on the Shogun. Pretty easy. Similar settings in the GH4. I'm not going to go into all of the cameras. If you want to, Stefan Czech did an amazing review of how to use all these different cameras with the Shogun, and I highly recommend going and checking his out. Let's talk about playback. When the Shogun first came out, it did not support playback. The function wasn't active because Atomos hadn't gotten it right, and they didn't want to ship that part of the software until they gotten it working right. And I think that was a good idea because now I really like it, which is nice. The reason why playback is good is because you can obviously review, you know, what you've shot. You can shoot it, press play, and review what it is you've shot. So there's this clip, play it back, you can scrub through. Really nice thing is you can actually check. Let me go and pick another clip actually. So just pick another clip, pause your play, tap on the plays, And you can see here you've got all these different clips to choose from. Double tap and it starts playing. What's really cool about this is you can bring up all of your scopes and all of your tools whilst this is playing. So you can actually check your exposure on the shot. You can check your white balance on the shot. You can check your standard exposure on the shot while you're playing it back. So that's a really, really powerful tool to have on set. I know I'm going to find that really, really useful. So I'm really looking forward to using it more and more on set, where I can stop and check with these scopes before having to get it into my NLE if I've got the shot right, and I can move on. It is a little bit more effort, but trust me, in the long term, it's going to save you a lot of heartache. Another really cool thing that you can do on the Shogun before you get your footage into your NLE, if you're using Final Cut Pro 10, is you can set in and out points. I'll show you how. So let's say I like this shot from this point here. I tap on favorites, tap on favorite once, scrub to where I want that to come out, tap on favorite again, and you can see now that there's a little green bar where I've set that in, and that set my in and my out. Now when I pull that into Final Cut Pro 10, it's already going to have my in and my out points. I'm actually going to set another in and out point. So tap favorite at the in, tap favorite at the out, and you've got your in and your outs. If you tap reject off of the rest of the clip, again, you can set in and outs for rejected parts of your clips. So let's say, for example, you are finish a shoot, you're on the train, you're on your way home, you can just pull the Shogun out, have it in your lap, and you can actually do in and out points there and then on your public transport, because obviously you wouldn't do this while you're driving, because that's what crazy people would do. Crazy dangerous, not crazy good. There's a difference. And yeah, so that's a really, really cool feature of what you can do with the Shogun in its playback module. To get out of playback, it's a little non-intuitive, I think. You tap on record and that puts you back into your live mode. A couple of final features that I just want to talk about with the Atomos Shogun that I really like about the product. To begin with, the hard drives. So some other systems on the market allow you to only use proprietary drives that you have to buy from that manufacturer. Atomos allow you to use whatever drives you like, as long as they're fast enough, in the Shogun. Now, fair enough, the proprietary ones do have an advantage because you know 100% that those drives are designed for that system and they're definitely going to work, whereas using any drives off the shelf, you're not 100% sure. Again, Atomos has got you covered. They've tested a whole heap of drives and they have a list on their website in terms of what drives have been tested and at what speeds each drive will work and what kind of footage is going to work well with each drive. So don't underestimate the power of being able to use just standard drives in the Atomos Shogun for recording. Updates. Another great feature is the fact that Atomos has said that firmware updates and new features for the Shogun will be coming out regularly, and they have already, and those will be completely free. There's not going to be any licensing fees, there's not going to be any ongoing costs. Some of the updates that they've talked about, which I'm pretty excited about, is to begin with there's going to be raw DNG. So for example, the Blackmagic cinema camera, which is what I am recording this on at the moment. At the moment, I could push ProRes out of it to the Atomos Shogun, but when that update comes out, I'll actually be able to record raw off of my Blackmagic camera out of the HDMI into the Atomos Shogun. So that's pretty exciting. I'm fairly confident I'll need solid state for that because it's pretty demanding. Why I'm excited about that is also that the cards, the speed of the cards that you need to have in the Blackmagic camera cost a fair bit of money, so being able to use the Atomos for that without having to buy more cards for the Blackmagic, pretty happy about that. The other update that I'm really excited about is that Atomos has also announced that you will be able to export not just 4K but standard HD out of the HDMI. Why is that exciting? Well, you always want as much redundancy as possible when you're shooting on set. So for example, with me, when I'm done sort of every half hour of takes, I will rip that card out, either myself, hand it to an assistant, get that card backed up. So I've got a copy of it. So I'm not having a whole day's shoot on one card. If something goes wrong, I'm a dead man, or I have to reshoot, which is always a pain in the tush. So what I'm thinking is Atomos have got another cool little product called the Ninja Star. Tiny little box, again, records ProRes HD through HDMI. So what I'm looking at doing once that update comes out to push HDMI out of the Shogun is have the Shogun recording in 4K, but have HDMI coming out of it into the Ninja Star, getting a ProRes HD backup of my 4K footage as I'm shooting it. So I've got their redundancy built in. 4K. People are really excited about 4K, but should you even be shooting in 4K? Well, that's entirely up to you. Myself, I will be shooting some stuff in 4K, but not everything. The reason for that is, number one, I haven't had any clients ask me for 4K delivery, and I don't think I'm going to see that for at least another 12 to 18 months. What I will be shooting 4K in is a lot of B-roll and cutaways, because if I'm traveling for a gig and I'm getting some location shots, it's going to be a bit of a pain in the tush to have to fly all the way out there to get those location shots again. So if I record them in 4K now, I've got the archival stuff. I can use it again when I need it in 4K. What I'm going to really enjoy using the Atomos for on set is for all of those scopes and tools, making sure that my white balance is spot on, making sure that my exposure is set, making sure that my focus is right, being able to review the stuff. When 3D LUTs come out, that's another update that I'm going to be pretty excited about, is that I can shoot in S-Log or P-Log or whatever log I want to do. And if I've got a client on set and they want to review the footage, those LUTs are going to make sure that they're not looking at the footage going, oh, this is really, that the colors look awful, and then I have to explain what S-Log is and all that kind of stuff. They can just see what it's going to look like closer to the final product with a little bit of grading afterwards. So there's a lot of really cool features that you can use the Atomos Shogun for without even touching the 4K stuff, and on top of that you got 4K. So I am pretty excited about it, and I'm looking forward to using it on a lot of shoots coming up. So a little gotcha that I just wanted to talk about and make sure that you're aware of is something to do with S-Log and the Atomos Shogun. Here I have some footage in Final Cut Pro 10 that I've shot, and you can see I've got 3 tracks of LT, HQ, and 4:2, all ProRes that has been recorded on the Atomos Shogun. And at the top here, I've got some footage that I've shot on the A7S natively, and then with the exact same conditions, shot that in ProRes HQ and so on the Atomos. Now watch what happens when I disable this top line, and particularly look at the exposure settings in my scopes. You'll notice that my exposure settings change ever so slightly, and the image also changes. Now it's not a huge change, and I'll do it a couple more times so you can see it, but there is that change there, which would seem to suggest that the color that you're getting from S-Log on the camera natively and the color that you're getting out of S-Log on the Atomos Shogun are not the same. It turns out the way that the Sony a7S pushes S-Log out of HDMI is slightly different. So the S-Log that you get out of HDMI is not the same that you get natively in the camera. Not a huge deal, not a deal breaker, but just something to be aware of. So that's what I was hoping was going to be a short look at the Atomos Shogun and into something a little bit longer. I'd like to thank Tony and the rest of the marketing team at Atomos for allowing me to borrow the Shogun for a few weeks and really get my head around it and have a good play. I'd like to thank Kathy Jordan from the local framing studio for giving us the time and letting us shoot a whole bunch of stuff down at her place. We had a lot of fun that day. Finally, I'd like to thank Michael DeFlorio from Point of View Media, who came down and helped out with the shoot. It really was fantastic to have you on the day. And that is my look at the Atomos Shogun. Until next time, from capturingpassion.com, I'm Lee Herbert, and you're not.